Hey Matt, it's Chloe. Today is Tuesday, September 10th, and I'm here today to talk about Cloud Atlas. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, Chloe, you look different. Well, yes, I did
Tyler, what are you doing?
cut...
Get off my bed. Sorry about that. Don't know what's gotten into him lately. He's just been very... I don't even have a word for it. So Cloud Atlas. I haven't actually watched your video yet, Matt, because I didn't want your opinions to influence mine in any way. And I actually got to the part that we're reviewing last week, so I'm gonna have to skim through this a little bit just to remember each of the sections. So my first observation is that the book makes a lot more sense than the movie. I watched the movie over the summer, and it was kind of confusing because they do little snippets of each character in this book instead of whereas in the book they go chronologically. They start in the past and then move up to present and then go into the future. And in the movie they just kind of took bits and pieces of each of the stories and just kind of melded them together in a way that I guess works cinematically but would not work in a book like this. So, as I haven't seen your video, I don't know what you talked about, so I'm just gonna kind of give a brief overview of this book. This book is Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell. It was published in, I think, 2004? 2004. And it was made into a movie, almost instantly after it was published, which I've always found strange, but I guess that's a thing now to do. And it starts off with the Pacific Journal of Adam Ewing. Personally, I love Adam Ewing just because he's played by Jim Sturgis, and he's one of my favorite actors. Adam Ewing is pretty much this American witness, I don't know what the word is, I can't think of it right now. Someone who, gets a will from somebody, and then he has to go and, find the person that the will gives stuff to. So he has this will that was from this guy in San Francisco, and he goes to Australia to try and find the person in the will, but he ends up not finding him and getting sick on the trip, and he meets this doctor, Dr. Goose, which I think is a rather hilarious name, and it's just kind of his journal that he wrote while he was on this ship going from Australia or New Zealand. He's not actually on Australia, he's on an island out, off the coast of Australia. And then they go back to San Francisco, at least in this part of the book. They don't make it back to San Francisco yet. I'm pretty sure that happens at the very end. The next section after that is called Letters from Zettelgem. It's the story of Robert Frobisher, and he's writing his letters to his lover, Sixsmith, whose first name I can't think of right now. And it's just kind of his story of how he traveled from England. How do you know it takes me more than one day to make a video? I just totally change clothes. So I don't really remember what I was talking about yesterday. I could have watched the video, but I'm just gonna be lazy and not. But I think I was at Letters from Zettelgem. Pretty much Robert goes to work for Vivian Ayres. Vivian's just kind of this huge jerkwad, and Robert ends up kind of having an affair with Vivian's wife, whose name I can't remember, but I know that her last name is really long. And Vivian's daughter is kind of also a little bit of a jerkwad. So there's that. One thing I found kind of weird is that pretty sure Robert doesn't like women, so it's weird that he sleeps with a lot of them, but I guess that's probably a metaphor for something that I'm not understanding right now. But Letters from Zettelgem is where the book gets its title, at least initially. Robert ends up writing this symphony piece called the Cloud Atlas Sextet, and I'm guessing that's just where the name Cloud Atlas comes from, at least for right now. The next section is called Half-Lives, the first Louisa Ray mystery, and the main character in this part is, of course, Louisa Ray, and she's a kind of a journalist. She's trying to be a journalist, but not really. Her father was this war journalist who went to Vietnam or something, And so she's like trying to live up to his expectations even though he's like dead now, so like she wants to like do what he wanted her to do. And she ends up meeting Sixsmith, who the letters from Zettelgem were addressed to. He's now a scientist. In an elevator, as she's leaving this like rager, I guess, I don't even know what it is, they end up getting trapped in this elevator together for a few hours, and they're like talking, and then Sixsmith like gives her, he like asks her what lengths she would go to protect a source, and she was like, I would die for a source, or something that extreme. And Sixsmith is about to tell her something, and then the elevator turns back on, and she like, her journalist curiosity just like, she really wants to know what he was gonna tell her. So she ends up trying to find him at this nuclear power plant that they're building off the coast of California, I'm assuming. And turns out that he's like on vacation or something. He ended up actually being killed in a hotel in an airport because he was gonna go back to England from California, but this like assassin killed him, which was ridiculous. And it turns out that this power plant that they're building is just like a setup, like they're building it to fail so that this one like politician can like save the world or something. I'm kind of confused about it. I read it a while ago. I probably should have reread some of this. So yeah, the last thing with Louisa Ray is that she gets pushed off a bridge, like her car. And one of the connections between Louisa Ray and Robert Frobisher is that they have this birthmark between their shoulder and their collarbone that looks like a comet or like a shooting star, and like that's how you know who all is like the main character, kind of. And then the next section is called The Ghastly Ordeal of Timothy Cavendish. Ghastly Ordeal of Timothy Cavendish. And Timothy Cavendish is played by Jim Broadbent in the movie, so I really like that because I think he's awesome because he was in Harry Potter. And it's just kind of this guy Tim Cavendish is a small-time publisher. Like he's never really like hit it off with any of his books. And this one like kind of like a convict, I guess. I'm not really sure what he does. He writes this book called Bloody Knuckles, and it's like his story, and it gets a bad review, and the author guy ends up killing the critic who gave his book a bad review, so then of course he's like catapulted into stardom. And it's just kind of like Timothy Cavendish ends up pretty much just like stealing from the author. Like he's like, oh, it's royalties, and like he had to pay back all of his like debts and loans from when he had other books that weren't like that great. And the author's brothers come and they're like, yeah, we're gonna kill you unless you get us like 50,000 pounds by like 3 p.m. tomorrow. So Timothy freaks out and he goes to his brother to ask for help, and his brother tricks him into signing into this like old people home, this like retirement home, and Timothy Cavendish thinks it's a hotel, and there's just like lots of shenanigans. And the next section, the last section that we read, is called An Orison of Sonmi 451. And Sonmi 451 is this clone who's a waitress, servant, slave, pretty much. They're not born with souls, so it's okay that they're enslaved. And she and this other clone she has like a different job, end up like kind of like waking up and like realizing that their life sucks. And so the other clone, Yuna 939 is the other clone, they end up getting in a little bit of trouble. Yuna ends up kidnapping this little boy from a birthday party at their restaurant, which is called Papa Song's, which I'm kind of assuming is like a jab at McDonald's. And Yuna ends up getting killed because they can't have rogue clones, because that would just be bad for society, I suppose. And Sonmi is like giving this interview to this one like historian person, and she's very honest and she has a very complex vocabulary, which isn't normal for a clone. And then she ends up being like commissioned to this university to do research on clones because she's so intelligent and like she's so aware of her surroundings. And shenanigans. She goes from being an experimental clone to being like a student at the university where she was sent. And she also has the birthmark, which indicates that she is the reincarnation of Adam, Louisa, Robert, and I think possibly also Timothy Cavendish. I don't know. I don't think it mentions his birthmark. It probably does. I haven't been reading this critically, which is bad because we're doing a review. But yeah, it ends. The last line of this chapter is Sami 451. I am not exactly who I said I am. So that's intense. So you don't know who this guy is. Heiju Im, who he's like one of the other students at the university. And then the next section we're going to be reading is called Sluicious Crossin' and Everything After. One thing I do really like about this book is that even though it's all written by David Mitchell, he uses very, very different writing styles for each character, which is really cool. It's funny because all of the characters are like technically the same person, but not really. The big plot point in this is that each like succeeding chapter mentions the one before, so it's kind of like a self-aware book, whereas like Robert was reading Adam Ewing's journal, and then Louisa was reading Robert's letters, and then Timothy ends up reading Louisa's book, and Sami sees a movie based on Timothy Cavendish's life, and it's just all very ridiculous. And I'm really looking forward to reading the second half of this, and that's pretty much all for today. Sorry that I couldn't do this yesterday. Yesterday was very strange. Tuesdays are just weird. So I will see you tomorrow because tomorrow is Thursday. Bye, Matt.